Hello and welcome to the new series of Drishti IAS. My name is Pooja Dwivedi. The Fed has once again raised the interest by 375 points, showing that it is still on a trajectory of tightening monetary policy. The US is sitting on a recession, and 2023 is the year in which it is being predicted that the global recession will take place. What is recession? What are the causes, impacts, and what is the current issue with respect to the slowing down of the global economy? Along with what are the impacts that are going to be there for India with respect to the current move by the Fed? So we will talk about that only from the perspective of GS Mains Paper 2nd and 3rd, and from the perspective of course, the prelims. It's important that you go through the conceptual as well as the factual part of it. Now, what is a recession? First of all, we will talk about that. Recession is a process. It is not a result, but it is a process of economic activity turning negative for a considerable period of time. The unemployment rate rises because layoffs can occur. Apart from that, consumer and business activity are cut back because of the expectations of a weak growth in the environment, of the economic environment. Also, this is a vicious cycle because boom and peak hours that are there and recession period. This particular period is very evident as a part of the normal business cycle of any economy. But we have to understand the depth and the longevity of any downturn in the economic activity. That is important for us to know what a recession would look like. It's a normal part of the overall business cycle. Now, moving ahead, if we talk about the macroeconomic definition of it, a 2 consecutive quarter of negative GDP growth is known as recession. Moving ahead, now first of all, let's talk about signs of recession. Who announces the recession first of all? The formal announcement comes from the National Bureau of Economic Research, of which the Business Cycle Drafting Committee takes into different measures in order to understand if an economy is going through recession or not. For example, the income of the people, employment, is it high or low? Inflation adjusted expenditure. If you're spending on something, what is the actual spend on it, expenditure on it, with respect to adjusting the inflation? Retail sales as well as manufacturing and production. These are other things that the committee takes into account. The major focus is on employment and inflation adjusted expenditure. Moving ahead, now signs of recession. The most clear sign is unemployment. When there is a sustained increase in job losses and a spike in unemployment, we can definitely gauge it from the perspective of an ongoing recession. Number of people who apply for unemployment benefits each week can also show us to be a sign of recession, because higher the number of people who are applying for these allowances, the more the chances are there that recession is going on. There is also an inverted yield curve. The yield curve of bonds, corporate bonds, also tend to show us as a sign of recession. When the yield on a short-term treasury, such as a 3-month T-bill, is lower than the yield on a 10-year treasury, the inverted yield curve occurs. Because you see that in the short term, because there is a recession, the returns would not be very high on the treasury bills as compared to other ones. So inverted yield curve is also one of the signs. Interest rates. This is the most important from the perspective of the current situation. The Federal Bank, the Fed of USA, is increasing the interest rates because, first of all, whenever there will be an increase in the interest rates, loan would be costlier. People would not tend to take loans to buy homes or any other durable product. That means there will be less money in the economy, making the inflation to come down. So, slowing growth and high hiring. These are the two significant factors that the Fed has taken into account. Jerome Powell, who is the chair of the Fed, wants a soft landing. We will talk about soft landing as well. Now, there are two objectives of the Fed. First, to keep the inflation within the target of 2%, and the second one is to utilize the human capacity, making the employment rates high. These are the two, you can say, objectives. The labor market right now is resilient, but what is not resilient is the inflation. Inflation is very high. Jobs are there, but layoffs are taking place because in a recession, companies do not want to put investment into employees' hands who are not giving them proper returns. So in order to cut back the investment in the form of salaries, they will lay off the employees. When the employees will get laid off, they will have less purchasing power. They will not look for investment because their purchasing power is low. Then what will happen? The demand will come down and then it will finally match supply. Supply right now is not in a healthy state. Okay. The economy slows just enough. What does it want to do? The economy slows down just enough to restrict wage growth. Okay, this is one of the points you have to keep in mind, that economy slows down in such a manner that wage growth does not occur. This is one of the reasons layoffs are taking place. If there is wage growth, then inflation will move higher because people will have more purchasing power and more demand will occur. Supply won't be matched because investment is not there. Investment is not there because the growth, future prospects in growth right now are not very healthy. And hiring without triggering a recession. Hiring should be in such a manner that we do not hire people so that, more people, so that, again, the same points I'm reiterating here, not to provide too much purchasing power in their hands so that demand does not go high. Moving ahead, now let's talk about the causes. The current one is the generalized tightening of the monetary policy that the banks are taking place. Not only Fed, but central banks around the world. There is also greater than expected overshoot of inflation targets. Inflation targets in every country are overshot right now. The Russian invasion of Ukraine, of course, has exaggerated the problem because before that also inflation was there. But because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the commodities and essential supplies such as food and other things are also getting impacted because there are structural and supply bottlenecks. And in order, anything to move to the places of demand, the supply has to take place. If the supply is not there, demand is very high, inflation will take place. Also, because of zero COVID policies of China, there is a slowing down in the economic activities in China. So these are the generalized factors. The inflation was on an upward trajectory even before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as I said, and the initial surge in energy prices occurred because the every economy in the world got back on track because of the economies wanted to get back on their feet after the COVID-19 pandemic. And the COVID-19 pandemic was, of course, something that had halted every economic activity. So as the economic activity, took again to the track, then there was a need and demand for energy. And because of that, inflation took place. There were also bottlenecks in supply chains because the cross-national, boundary was not being crossed even after economy started getting back on track. And then because of that, there were rising freight costs, shift in consumption of private sector towards goods also occurred, and it following the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, food and energy prices have also escalated. This is one. Second, there is also job and wage growth plus inflation. As the economy got back on track, it started hiring more people because there were no, the amount of jobs that were created in the period of 2020 and 2021 were fewer as we compare to the later part of 2021 and then 2022. Because of that, more jobs were created, and because of that, more wages were given. And because of that, inflation, it shot. So, tight labor market conditions are there, boosting wages and helping to mitigate the lost purchasing power and growth after the pandemic, such as United States, Canada, UK. Now, with nominal wage growth failing to keep pace with inflation, as people want to, the companies that have created jobs want to get more and better economic opportunities for their own companies, they of course are raising wage, but the structural issues are still there of supply. So what happens? The nominal wage growth rate is not able to keep up with the inflation. Inflation is high, very high, because of the employment that has been there. Employment is an all-time high right now. Okay, so I'm not talking about India, around the world. So this is the wage growth, okay, but inflation is like this. So it's not keeping pace with the supply chain. So that is why this is happening. Now, household real disposable income have declined in many OECD countries. So because there is a lot of inflation and the wage is not matching, so what happens that the disposable income becomes less because you are not able to buy as much as you could have before. So that is also one of the reasons. Now, because of that, what has happened? Private consumption has come down. Maybe people do not want to buy certain unnecessary things. They are delaying it as a matter of fact. So that is why investment and profitability are also coming down. Moving ahead, there is also anti-inflationary measures and fall of equity market. Company bonds are also not doing well. Financial conditions have tightened. Central banks have responded increasingly vigorously to above target inflation by increasing interest rate. This has pushed up market-based measure for real interest rates. Equity market in much of the world have fallen sharply this year. Corporate bond spreads have risen and capital outflows are taking place. One of the reasons that we have to keep this particular topic in mind will come on later when I will talk about impacts of this move on India. Now we find the Federal Reserve raising interest rates aggressively to combat inflation. Why? Because first, if it will raise interest rates, it will create a situation in which people will take less loans. Because as the interest rates are high, loans will be provided at a higher rate. People might not want to take loans this period of time. So, if people are not getting loans, they will have less purchasing power, hence less demand, and hence it will match the supply and inflation will come down according to this move. Secondly, if rates have risen according to the Fed's move, what will happen? People will try to, around the globe, people will try to invest into the US. Why? Because they will get a higher rate of return. So, money around the globe will also move towards Fed or US, we can say. So, well above the Fed's target for inflation of around 2%, that means the target rate of inflation has been breached. The Fed has increased rates by 0.75% increments at each meeting since April. This is, you can see, more than 2 times. Also, there are also recent positive data points with respect to the current situation in the US. US might not have recession right now, but in the next 5 to 9 months, it can do so. It can be in that position. What are the positive data points? Annualized 3-quarter GDP growth of 2.6% has been registered, which offset whatever the negative GDP was there for quarter 1 and quarter 2. A strong job market is also over there. Jobs are still rising, but layoffs are also occurring. October unemployment rate remaining historically low. Unemployment is low, employment is high, okay, at 3.7%, okay. Moving ahead, now let's talk about the inverted yield curve, which I have already told you about. Coupled with lagged effect of interest rate hikes, that the lag time is 6 months. This has created another issue. Apart from that, Fed is aiming for a final Fed funds target of 5%. It is also known as the terminal rate. Alright. Now let's move on to the current risks of a recession with respect to Fed only. Higher interest rates, they make everything from home mortgages to credit cards rates to rise. Okay. And this has cut down the expenditure from the public. So public consumption has come down. This is one of the reasons why we see that investment will also not be there, because future prospects are not very bright. There is a final debate on soft landing versus hard landing. What is soft landing? Soft landing is lower inflation and a minor slowdown in US economy, which the Fed wants. Hard landing is where inflation comes down at the expense of economic growth. That means companies might lay off more employees. Government might not want to invest in such projects in which employment gets created. So that will cause more people to, get laid off or not find employment opportunity, and they will have no purchasing power or less purchasing power, and then there will be less currency in the economy and finally less demand, and hence it will match the supply. Now what about India? India is still at a good place if we compare it to other economies. It will still grow at 6 to 7% in the next 2023-24 fiscal. But the higher interest rates in the US, it leads to money moving from other parts of the world. As I have already told you, interest rates are higher. So money will not get invested in India or any other emerging market but in US, because the rate of return is higher as compared to other things. So that causes the weakening of the rupee, and in the sense that the dollar will strengthen. So retail inflation will be there, and because of that, why retail inflation will be there? Imports, as dollar has strengthened now, so imports will become costlier, and that will lead to retail inflation. US has raised its domestic interest rates in order to control inflation. Now it ends up exporting inflation in the form of more pricey imports to other countries such as India, which is happening since the past few months. Now higher interest rates in the US means lesser money moving to other parts of the world. People and corporate sector in general would not want to invest in emerging market startups and unicorns, but of course in the US, because of higher interest rates over there. So that can also lead to cost cutting by unicorns, such as laying off of employees as well, and certain startups can also close down. Higher interest rates in the US and other parts of rich world is leading to real estate bubbles in these countries popping. What is real estate bubble? Real estate bubble is basically you can say it is a phenomenon in which we understand that the demand for homes and real estate is high, but the supply is very less. And what is popping of the bubble? If the interest rates have become higher, then a person might not want to buy houses and real estate because they are going to get loans at a higher rate of interest. So this causes the popping of the bubble of real estate. And when that happens, the psychological factor remains that household is the biggest source of income for any family, any individual. And when that happens, people might not look at the household as an asset, their homes and real estate as an asset, and then it will lead to people spending less in the economy. Okay, and then we understand that service exports are positively affected, but consumption of goods are negatively affected. The high chances of an economic slowdown in the US has led to American technology companies such as Amazon, such as Meta, to lay off employees. According to National Public Radio in the US points out that more than 35,000 tech workers across 72 companies have been laid off this month, and this will also impact India in the sense that it can have an impact on the consumption pattern of people who are in the IT sector, and remittances as well. Plus imports from other countries will also get impacted, retail inflation. It will also have some impact on India's IT sector, in which outsourcing of jobs occur. And if the federal and other world central banks continue to raise interest rates, it will also have an impact on RBI. It will also try to match the same. So that is also the problem. Now, which parts of the world actually get into a recession? Then what will happen? Oil prices will fall because economic activities will come down, and energy supply will be, of course, still be there. Energy supply will be a lot, but demand will be less. So this mismatch will lead to the energy prices to come down, which will be a relief to India. Okay, moving ahead now, let's talk about our question. In the light of the Fed raising the interest rates, analyze the impacts on the Indian economy. In 250 words, you can write it. Okay, I hope you understood the entire topic, and thank you so much for watching. Stay updated and stay engaged.